Welcome to the DraftKings running back analysis for the divisional round. I'm Jason Gilbo, J Gilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J Clay. More names this week in terms of running backs. It was pretty straightforward last week. How do you feel kind of overall general consensus?
Definitely better. Definitely better. I mean, I think it's still the Le'Veon Bell and log out basic theory. But when you look at it, obviously you have Ezekiel Elliott in the mid tier, and you have Thomas Rawls in a good matchup this week. There's some interesting pieces. There's a lot of different ways to go in terms of hedging and getting exposure to certain guys. But at the end of the day, I think we know where our bread is buttered, and I just wanted to say bread is buttered in that sense. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's Le'Veon Bell, 10-5. I mean, you look at what he's doing, averaging 150, all-purpose yards per game this season, showed that upside, obviously, last week. I think Kansas City is just a somewhat misleading run defense. Like, I think people will go, oh, tough matchup, but they really haven't been that great.
no, they haven't. They've been okay, against the run this year. They're certainly not a juggernaut. They have a lot of edge rushers and athletic safeties and corners. They don't have they have done Terry Poe, but it doesn't seem like they have that dominant run D like we actually had seen in previous years. That's not their strength this year. So I'm not afraid of using him at all. It's really more the passing game and Ben Roethlisberger on the road that I'm worried about. I think Bell's going to get 30 touches again. So business as usual there. I wouldn't be worried about the Chiefs defense at all.
No, I'm not either. And I think, we'll get into Ezekiel Elliott here, 8,500, $2,000 difference. Where does he kind of stand for you this week? Because he really does sit in a middle tier where it's Bell and then Elliott, and then we kind of start sneaking into a lot of other names.
So I love this game for correlation. I think you can definitely, it sounds weird to say you can play, Aaron Rodgers and the opposing team's running back, but I actually think that's pretty viable if you think the Cowboys are going to get up. Obviously that slows the pace down, but I still think on this type of slate, you can look at Rodgers. But, just in terms of that play in general, he's on an island in his own tier. Him and Bell are kind of he's 2,000 apart from him. So what does that really even matter for, what lineups you're considering? If you swap off those guys, you're going to make a really different lineup either way. So, either you're using Elliott with Bell or you're using Elliott alone. It just isn't going to make, it's going to make a really different lineup either way. So I think you're kind of getting your hand forced with using Elliott either way. Either you're, paying up big time at wide receiver if you use Elliott, or you're just paying down everywhere and using Zeke and Bell together. So it's kind of like your hand is forced in terms of that lineup construction. I do like Bell or I do like Elliott. Obviously has that 20 to 25 point, sort of range of outcomes like we saw all season. I don't love the ceiling. I feel like if Dallas gets up huge in this game, he just does his normal 125 rushing yards and a touchdown if they win this game. That's just, I don't know. That's kind of what I envision. Packers are actually a pretty decent run day. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to go so far back, but obviously we look in that previous matchup where Dallas went up and just basically manhandled Green Bay. At a time they weren't playing particularly well. He rushed about 28 times for 157 yards or so. No touchdowns. You can't take that at that price. He needs to find the end zone. He needs to absolutely find the end zone. Price.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I know I'm talking more about the price range and the DK play rather than the actual physical play, but it's more of a lineup construction thing with Zeke than anything else. It's, okay, am I playing Zeke and Bell together? Is that going to get me 60 points? If it gets me 60 points, maybe I'm getting an advantage there. If it's not, then maybe Julio, Antonio Brown was a more interesting way to go. I think you're just kind of hedging your exposure really with Zeke more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And then we'll get into this game. Overall, we'll talk about the backs here, Seattle and Atlanta, because we start to see those types of guys. I mean, Thomas Rawls, Devontae Freeman, your next most expensive guys. Rawls a full 6,900 there compared to Freeman at 59. Tevin Coleman also 4,500. You can never really rule him out on a small slate because he just has that big time potential.
Yeah, so there's two real ways I see this game going. Either Seattle, Atlanta starts scoring early and Seattle can keep the pace, and then, Thomas Rawls gets some chunk plays, maybe gets that 100-yard bonus and a touchdown. I mean, I could also see it just completely evaporating that run game from last week, and, Atlanta gets up by 17 points and by the second quarter, and it's just Russell Wilson show the rest of the game, and Rawls isn't even really involved. So I think that's definitely something you have to take into account. I know Rawls had a good week last week. That's not necessarily indicative of what we're going to see this week. So, I mean, you take that as a small sample, but you account for, the end of the season where he ended his year with 3 straight games at 1 yards per or below 2 yards per carry in the last 3 games on all 3. So, it's a really volatile play. I wouldn't be too confident in it, but there also is upside there. He's not going to be 7 to 10% owned like he was last week. So as far as Devontae Freeman, I don't love him as a play. I like Coleman there better because I think you're going to get lower ownership, and we've seen Coleman blow up against good defenses a few times this year. Even against some good run defenses like Carolina, he had 9 for 90 and a touchdown. He had that huge game with the 30-yard reception as well. He had that big Denver game. So I think you kind of take that into account and say, okay, this might not be a Freeman game. Is kind of, so I guess I'm hedging off him a little bit if I were to evaluate that game more so than I think other people will.
Yeah, I think we look in that range alone, the 5K range. A noticeable discount from guys that it's not like Freeman has a significant edge in terms of snaps and touches over Coleman and over the course of the season. I mean, when Coleman was healthy at the beginning of the year, it was pretty evenly split, and we kind of saw that a little bit heading towards the end of the stretch there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Freeman. I just think in terms of this matchup, they haven't used him in the passing game as much as Coleman. Obviously, he has, 13 targets and 13 catches in the last 2 weeks of the year. That wasn't quite, how things had gone the rest of the year. He hadn't had over 5 targets in any other game. So I think you kind of take that into consideration. Seattle's run D is good. Their pass D is not quite. So I think that's where the Coleman big play is where I'm trying to make my money.
Yeah, we've certainly seen it. Another game here to kind of break down, and New England's, pass catching backs, obviously LeGarrette Blount in play this week. Obviously the highest team total on the board. They're expected to just get, run over the Texans. Where are you leaning towards Blount here?
So this is where tournaments come into play. I like Blount. He's more cash than tournament this week, as much as you can get on a 4-game slate. The pass catching backs are just tournament flyers to me that you want to get exposure to, but aren't necessarily confident in either. James White obviously has retained his role, even with Deion Lewis coming back. I think that is certainly something that limits the upside there. If it was just Deion Lewis, I'm probably all in on him. If it's just James White, I'm probably all in on them at their prices. But nice, cheap guys. You want to get more like star scrubs lineups in there, then I'm cool. I'm cool with either one. But kind of like I was talking about with Tevin Coleman, I want to take my shots with him. At sort of that range. James White obviously in a different price tier, but it's all kind of the same to me. I just like Coleman a little more.
And at that range here, we got Lamar Miller, Ty Montgomery, Spencer Ware. Are you just kind of out on those guys this week?
Yeah. I can see a scenario where Lamar Miller gets 25 rushes and 100 yards. I can certainly envision that happening. He's had some big games against New England in the past. Having said that, there's a major blowout alert. I mean, and we've seen this in New England, for 15 years now, where they just come in and this team comes in and they have like an inexperienced or below average quarterback and they just lose 41-3. So, I mean, that's really like, you can't project that, but I really do think like 20% chance of just a massacre. So I mean, I like Lamar Miller. The game flows just potentially. If Brock gets a big play early, Miller can get like 12 rushes before the first half is over, then yeah, like, okay. But
I think, like, I'm looking, for me, I see this game playing out like Lamar Miller, all of his like touches are going to come in like a period of time where like New England isn't moving the ball exactly how they want it because like Houston's Texans are just being a little bit stifling. But then just the floodgates open like there on out, and he doesn't see a touch for the rest of the game.
Right. Like, so it's one of those games where you think Houston might be able to hold the Pats offense for like the first 3 possessions. One of those where, you look at the first few drives, like, oh, Pats punted first 3 drives, and then they go on one of those like 7 straight drive streaks where they just score a touchdown or a field goal every time. Like, it's gonna happen at some point. RIP, Brock Osweiler and CJ Fedorowicz. Unfortunately, season's coming to an end.
It's done. So, anyone else you feel like we left off the list here?
I mean, we can talk about Spencer Ware. I think he's just kind of been exposed as a volume guy at this stage in the year. He just hasn't really shown us much upside beyond that Atlanta game, and this obviously isn't going to be that type of situation here. So, he's whatever at 5,200. I can't do Ty Montgomery. I can't do it. I don't know. Him and Krista Michael being there kind of limits that, floor for me. It makes me a little uncomfortable. I will say, when Seattle's offense was at its best, CJ Prosise was smashing. I don't think he's going to play this week. If he does somehow play, kind of like Randall Cobb last week, if he's in there, that's a heck of a tournament play. That's going to be 5%. So something to look at. I think that's more of if they get to the next round, then you kind of pay attention to that upside. But, someone to keep an eye on at least.
Yeah, I mean, if he's in, I think you're building multiple lineups. I would take a shot. I mean, Atlanta hasn't been good against pass catching backs, and Prosise is certainly that.
Absolutely.
So. If you want to check out Russ's article, you can head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com, check out his top guys for the week and values, and be sure to check out the rest of our divisional round content.